What's up, everybody? My name's Daniel from Drafty Sports, and in this video, I'm going to take you behind the scenes to show you how we go about solving a problem with auction draft rooms. And the problem we're solving today is how to get teams seated in the draft room. You'd think that's a pretty easy thing to do, but unfortunately, it's not. Before I get into the content of this video, I want to first introduce myself. As I said, my name is Daniel. I am the one-man show behind Drafty Sports. So if you go to draftysports.com and submit a support ticket, or if you tweet at us at Drafty Sport on Twitter, or if you follow us on Instagram, on YouTube, Facebook, any of those platforms, if you hop into a live chat session and chat it up with any of the agents, I'm the agent. I'm the guy behind the Twitter. So I'm the guy. If you email us at commish@draftysports.com, I'm the guy you're talking to. So feel free to shout at me on Twitter, on Facebook, in the comments on this YouTube video if you have any questions about what I'm talking about or just want to shoot the breeze with fantasy football, fantasy soccer, fantasy La Liga, fantasy basketball, because basketball and hockey are starting in December this year. So look for that on Drafty if you want to have an auction draft, the best auction draft experience for fantasy basketball, fantasy hockey. DraftySports.com. We're going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of you. I don't have a team yet, but hopefully soon. So this is the second episode of this new video podcast that I'm putting on Drafty Sports called Draft Business as Usual. Because that's all we talk. We talk draft business here, and I am quarantined here in my house. This is my wife's art room. She's an art teacher, and so you see a lot of fun decorations. It's a pretty cool space, but I think the sound is kind of echoey. There's no soundproofing going on in here, so I apologize if I'm hard to understand, but hopefully you'll understand everything I'm talking about, and we'll move along. We'll be great friends. So let me, I guess, dive right in since I've done the introductions. I want to talk about the difficulties of assigning a team to a draft room or assigning a team to a seat in the draft room, letting a team claim their seat in the draft room. On Drafty, we do this in two different ways, but the second way is changing soon, and I wanted to show you this video because the new way is launching, if not today, early next week, recording this on a Thursday, so yeah, probably within the next week or so, definitely by the end of October. We're launching a new mechanism for team assignments. That's kind of what I call it, team assignments in the draft room. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because it is one of the absolute number one, number two, number three, in the top three most frequently asked questions from this past draft season. And when I refer to the draft season, I'm referring to fantasy football because it is my bread and butter. It's my passion. I'm very familiar with the rosters and everything. It's what I've been playing for about 10 or 12 years now, although fantasy baseball, if you didn't watch the first video, fantasy baseball is how I got my start. Back when I was a preteen, back in the 90s, I played fantasy baseball. But so when I refer to the draft season, I'm referring to fantasy football. But anyway, so this past year, this past 2020 draft season, we made a lot of changes to how draft rooms operate. And what we offer. We introduced custom draft rooms. It was crazy successful. Lots of people interested in having a custom draft room, but also just a lot of upgrades with how the draft room itself functions, what the UI looks like. So if you subscribe to us on YouTube, I'm going to talk about a lot of these different elements because I want to take you behind the scenes as much as possible. Essentially, I'm not teaching you how to build a draft room, but I'm just showing you. It's a mix between showing you how much work goes into it and also just so that you have a better understanding of the mechanisms that are all at play because there's a lot going on, and I greatly underestimated the task before me when I built Drafty a few years ago. So without further ado, let me flip my screen around and show you the first of our two ways that we handle team assignments on Drafty right now. So if I'm looking at, or if you go to draftysports.com and fire up a mock draft, this is the screen you're going to come to. So we have a description about the mock draft. And then the purpose for the setup here is to keep things as simple as possible. So for a mock draft, you very simply define how much time you want on your timer, how long you want each draft to last, each auction to last. And then you define your team settings. How many teams? How big is the roster for your teams? And how much is the budget that you want to designate for each team. And in the mock and basic draft formats, if I go back to the top, in these two formats, this setup process is exactly the same. So we try to keep it super simple so you can just fly right through it. And because every team has the same budget and the same number of roster spots, we don't have to get into a lot of the team settings. So as a result, what we get, if I save and continue, it's going to create a mock draft room. The mock draft is only the top 100 players. So I get that question a lot too. It's like, when I do a real draft, are you going to have more players, or is it just the top 100? I'm like, yes, you will have all of the players. We have defenses and kickers. Yeah, we have defenses and kickers, but you just don't see those in the mock draft room because they are not in the top 100. So in the mock and the basic formats, this is how you get a really simple configuration for the commissioner, and then you send the draft room URL, copy and paste it, bloop, and send that over to your buddies so they can join the draft as well. But first thing commish needs to do is actually join the draft. So give your team a name. I typically go with Drafty Commish and click join draft. And now you see I've popped up there as the Drafty Commish with a little crown on my head. And I've got 15 open drafts, roster spots, $200 budget, just like we saw in the configuration. Easy peasy, right? No problem. And then if I copy and paste this URL, bloop, 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 copy, and I'm going to open up a new private window. Firefox is my browser of choice. So if I fire this up, you see that first thing they have to do is log in. And so for most folks, they have to create an account, but it's free to create an account. It takes only just like 30 seconds. It's no big deal. And I don't use, well, go back and watch the first video. I talk about privacy and how I don't use your information for anything. I don't use your email address for anything except to send you an email and say, hey, your account is going to be deleted or something because you haven't used it in so long. But anyway, so if I log in here in a different account, I'm using a different account for this. When the draft room loads, you see that here's Drafty Commish hanging out over here. He's got a crown on his head, and I need to name my team. So I'm going to name this team Daniel F, and I'm going to click join draft. So now I've joined this draft as well. And you see I've got the same number of roster spots and the same amount of budget. So that's how the mock and the basic drafts work. Because they have the simple team setup where every team starts with the same budget and the same roster, we don't have to do a lot of setup on the front end. So easy peasy, lemon squeezy, as my wife says. So if I go back, this is back in my commissioner account. If I go back, and I'm going to click over to the advanced room. Now the advanced and the custom rooms, the configuration is a little bit different. I'm going to tell you why. So if we scroll down, you see the draft settings are pretty much the same. The team settings are pretty much the same. You can set the master number of teams and the master roster and the master team budget. Watch these down here. When I change these, you see they all adjust. So if you adjust them up here, they automatically are adjusted down below. But then we have these extra items where we list all the teams. Now, this is even a little bit different from what you probably saw if you drafted on Drafty back during the fantasy football preseason. Originally, what this was just a couple months ago is that you also had to enter a team email. You had to enter an email address for each team. And the reason that that's the case, well, I guess I'm going to get into that right now. So let me circle back to that. Let me just walk you through this first. So the way this works is that you set up every single team in your league prior to entering your draft room. And the reason for this, so if I give myself a team here, I'll give my brother a team too. He's Joseph F. And we'll just add, I don't know, Gary P. as the fourth guy. And let me downsize this a lot since I don't have a lot of guys to work with. So we'll just have these 4 teams. The way this works, the reason you have to configure each team during your setup now is because in the advanced and custom rooms, you have the ability to set a unique roster size and a unique budget for every single team. And that's really beneficial. I'm going to give him $1,000 for 10 guys. That's really beneficial because usually we're dealing with keepers or a dynasty league of some kind. And so a little bit further down, we have the player selections where you can take out your keepers, and it's really great. But we have to define the teams because when it comes to keepers and these specific team settings, we are going to need to authenticate people as they join your draft so that they take the correct seat. And remember, this is the setup that is going to change here in the very near future. And I'm going to show you what the change is going to look like here in just a minute. But this is how we did things for this past season. So you've configured the teams here, you set the email address for each team, and even now you can set who gets the first turn. If you have a turn-based thing like a nomination process in a custom draft room, you can have turn-based options turned on. So if you have that, you can select the first turn, who gets the first turn, and it's pretty great. And then further down, just to show this to you because it's part of the setup, this is where you can handpick the keepers, or you can handpick which keepers to exclude from your draft pool. So if you're doing a clubhouse draft where you set up a clubhouse, assign your keepers within your clubhouse, and then you set up your draft room, you can leave everybody selected here, and when you create the draft room, it's going to automatically take those keepers out of your draft pool and assign them to team rosters, which is a really cool feature. Super excited about clubhouses, brand new this year. But for this one, you can just deselect people if these are the keepers in the league. I want to exclude them, so I deselect them from the player pool, and now they are not going to show up in the draft room because they are not draft eligible. So if I save and continue here, this is going to set up a draft room, and I'm going to cut the video here because I do have to pay to set up this draft room, and I don't want you to have to watch that step. Okay, and welcome back. So I went through the payment step and I set up this brand new draft room. I'm going to refresh the page real quick so that you can see how this page loads. I want that error message to show up because we got a lot of questions about that this past year. So previously, what's happening here behind the scenes is that Drafty is trying to authenticate my account with a team that I configured immediately when I joined the draft room. And you see the message here, I've not been assigned a seat. So the commish needs to update the team settings. I got so many questions about this this past year, and I want to explain what was going on. Obviously, this day and age, it's kind of like phone numbers. We don't remember people's phone numbers. I used to know my best friend's phone number when I grew up. I could give it to you right now because I still remember it to this day. But now I don't even remember my brother's phone number because he changed it a year ago, and nobody bothers memorizing phone numbers anymore. Well, user accounts are the same way on Drafty. When the commissioner creates your draft room for your league, it's pretty unlikely that they super know what the email address is for all of their league mates. So they have to go to GroupMe and they get the email address from the league mates, and then they plug those into the team. They probably capitalize stuff or don't capitalize stuff. And then eventually, as I showed you in the previous example on a mock draft, when they come to log in, they are prompted to, or they come to join the draft room, they are prompted to log in. And if they don't have a login already, they have to create an account. And then the draft room settings pair the email addresses configured in the setup with the email address that they registered when they created their account. And the matching is so precise, even if there is just a capital letter in the team configuration where there was not one in what they registered, it's not going to sync up. It's not going to pair. It's not going to recognize that this account belongs to that team. So it's very, very sensitive, and it was a real problem during this past draft season. So if I go into team settings, you can see how this works now. Let me zoom out a little bit since I'm kind of scrunched. And what happened before is that the team email, you would see everybody's team email address right here already. And that was fine, except that, half of them were probably wrong in some way or another, some typo or a capital letter or a dot or at Gmail when it should have been at Yahoo or something along those lines. So it never really matched up. So the way it works today, which is different from how it's going to work in about a week or two, is that we skip the email assignment on the front end altogether. And if I click the X up here, you see I don't even have a team here in the team summary box. And that's because I haven't even assigned my own account to a team. So let me do that right now. I'm going to go to team settings, and I'm going to change undefined next to DraftyC, and I'm going to make this commish at draftysports.com. That is the email address that I'm logged in with right now. I could also, if you're actually the commissioner trying to do this, you can copy and paste the email address right here. And what that's going to do is Absolutely nothing, because I now have to, I mentioned that it tries to authenticate when you load the draft room. And so if I just refresh the page now, Control R on any browser, I think Control R or Command R if you're on a Mac, will reload the draft room. And now it sees, oh, that team is assigned this email address, which matches this guy's user account that he registered on Drafty, and it automatically seats me. You see Drafty C. So let me go through this again with the other account that I have in this other browser window right here. I'm just going to copy and paste the draft room URL. And I am not assigned a team right now. Let me make this full screen. I'm not assigned a team right now, so it says the same error that we saw before. You've not been assigned a seat. And so what the commissioner now needs to do, if I flip back over here to my commissioner, let's go back into team settings. And you see now I've got a list of everybody looking at the room. For some reason, there's 2 of each person. I don't know why that's happening, but it's all good. So I'm going to take the email address from this other account and plug that into Daniel instead of undefined. And as soon as that happens, if I go back over here, now I can tell Daniel, myself, to refresh the page. And soon, I think when we rework this, it's going to refresh automatically, which will be really cool. But it can be kind of jarring, so we might not do that. And so when he refreshes the page, now the draft room recognizes his account. So not only do I see it here, it's highlighted in that little the white strip there as my team. I see my team. If I flip over to the commissioner and X out of the commish tools, you also see Daniel is now in the team summary. So this is how it works today. All you have to do as the commissioner is to go under team settings and copy and paste the email address from your users when they are looking at the draft room. If they're listed right there for you, assign each of them the team email. But coming soon, it's going to be even easier. And one thing before I move on, I just want to reiterate why we do things that way. And it's because during the configuration, I set a specific roster and budget for each team. And each team belongs to a certain owner or co-owners. And so we needed to be able to configure the rosters and budget as we go, and then we can assign the user. I don't know if I said that in a very clear way, but I think hopefully you understand. Also under team settings, one thing I'm not showing is that when a team is seated, if I zoom out just a little bit, you see that we can also edit the roster remaining for any of these teams, the roster and the budget left. So that's really easy to do. And again, it's just really helpful to be able to do that when people are assigned to their team. So you have full control as the commissioner, and it's really great. But hopefully, here in the next week, we're going to make this even easier, and I want to show you how we're doing that, what's coming up soon. Okay, and we're back. I had to make sure I was in the right development area, development space, and I was not, so now I am. So now I can show you what I was about to show you, which is the new team settings that we're about to launch in just a week or two. It looks very similar to what I just showed you with how things work today. You can still set how many teams. I'll just go ahead and change this to 4 like I did before. The master roster size, the master budget, and you see all the things edit down here. I'll go ahead and plug in Joseph's team and Daniel F. and Grady. I think he was Gary last time, but whatever. I'm going to say that Daniel F is my team. Actually, no, this is my commissioner team, so I'm going to leave it as the commish, but we're going to give the first term to Daniel. So now I'm going to go ahead and change the settings here the way I had them before, just a little bit, and give Gary or Grady $1,000 budget. So it looks very similar. The My Team indicator is the only thing that's different, and that is because now, as the commissioner, I'm automatically going to be assigned to my team when I join the draft. So you'll see that happen in just a sec. Then we scroll down. The player pool works exactly the same. In case you haven't tried a clubhouse, by the way, really can't say enough great things about the clubhouse. So I'm going to save and continue. This is in the development server, and so things move a little bit slower around here. I'm also not going to, well, I guess, yeah, no, I'm not going to show you the billing stuff here yet either. So let me just cut the video again. Okay, so I'm completing the payment step, and you're going to see the draft room load in just a sec. Again, this is the, whoa, that's crazy. So this is the local development server, and so things are a little bit crazy around here. And it moves a lot slower, but it is redirecting us. So here's our draft room, and hopefully things are going to load here. Yep, so there we go. So you see in the team summary box this time, we've got all 4 teams. They show up right off the bat so that the commissioner does not have that moment of panic when he loads the draft room and he doesn't see the teams that he just spent all that time configuring. And my team is highlighted in the kind of whitish thing. The commissioner is denoted by the crown, but my team is highlighted in white. And if I go under my team settings now, that looks a little bit different. I can now, as the commissioner, rename the teams. I can adjust the roster and the budget as I could before. And now I can also edit the turn index for each team. So if you need to reorder the turns for whatever reason, you're able to do that. What you still don't see here is the ability to assign a team, and that's because we've moved it to its own new little thing here. So on the left, or in the yellow table that you see, that's a list of the users who are already assigned to the teams. Or I guess a better way to say it is that is a list of the teams and any users that have been assigned to them. And then on the right is our list of spectators. Now, you will not, or you should not see the same person in both lists. If you have already assigned someone to a team, they will show up in the table on the left. And if you have a spectator who is not yet assigned to a team, you will see them on the right. Also, something that is changing is that when you drag the user, it's a drag and drop feature. I'm going to show it to you in just a sec. When you drag and drop a spectator into the table, they will their draft room will automatically reload. So you won't need to tell them, hey, I've just assigned your team, you can reload the page now. It will automatically reload for them. So just be aware that that's going to happen. So let me X this and do like I did before. I'm going to grab this URL and share it with the other account that I have open over here. Copy and paste it into the browser. This is a private browser, so I think I'm going to have to log in. Yep, I do have to log in again since this is a different development environment than the one I logged into before. So I'll just choose my account, hit login, and when we load the draft room, I should see that same error message that says I've not been assigned a seat and that the commission needs to do something. All right, so we're loading. Also, sometimes when you load a draft room with a direct link for the first time, so if you share it with your league mates and they try to load it right away, they might get a perpetual loading screen like this. So if this goes on for more than 10 seconds, it's pretty much assumed that the draft room failed loading and they need to reload the page. So I'm just going to hit refresh on my browser real quick. And that is one of the challenges that I have not yet overcome with assigning teams to things is making sure that the permissions match up with the browser session. What's happening when you see this loading screen perpetually is that the browser session is just expired. And so that refresh of the browser just is kind of like putting some oil in your engine, so to speak. And we're back on track. So a simple browser refresh does the trick. You see all the teams listed in the summary box, but there's none that are highlighted, and that's because I haven't been assigned to one yet. So let me flip back over to our commissioner account, and you see in the spectators menu here, I now have 2 guys, Drafty and Daniel. Both are spectating right now, so I know that I can assign Daniel since he's in the room, and so I can drag Daniel over to his team. And when I drop this, I'm going to flip back over to Daniel so that we can watch and see that his draft room is automatically reloading. Perfect. And so when this loads again, we should see the team highlighted in the team summary box. That is now my team. We'll also get the players loaded. I can now participate in the chat. And when the draft starts, I can interact with the bidding system. So there you go. I've got the white icon indicating that I'm connected. The red icons indicate that they are disconnected. So white means I'm connected on Daniel F. And there's my team. So everything worked perfectly. And hopefully this is going to save the commissioner a lot of headache for assigning teams. Now, the really cool thing, maybe like the best thing about this, besides reducing confusion, which is always great, is that now Drafty is going to support co-owners. So if I were to drag Daniel F over to Drafty Commish, and if I jump back over here to my Daniel account, the draft room is reloading. And now when it reloads, my team is no longer going to be highlighted as Daniel F, but rather this development server is really slow. The live site is much faster. So the team that is highlighted is going to be my Drafty Commish team. When and if this finished loading. All right, so I'm going to refresh this again. Because this server is so slow, I think the browser session is timing out kind of regularly. It's kind of a problem, but it's okay because the live server is much beefier. Yeah, there we go. All right, so now you see there's no one on Daniel F, so he is disconnected, and I am highlighted as Drafty Commish in both places. So this is my Daniel F account. You can see that I'm not the commissioner. I don't have the commissioner options up here to assign a team or to look and see who the spectators are. If I flip back over to my commissioner, where I left off here, hit the X, you see here's my spectators and everything that I expected it to be. So that's a really, really cool feature. We're so excited about having co-owners now able to interact with the draft on the same team. So that's really, really exciting. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to show you. Let me just recap kind of what we talked through. I showed you the two ways that Drafty is currently authenticating teams. The first is the very streamlined way for mock and basic drafts. We just want to take all the barriers out of that setup, because every team is going to have the same budget and the same number of roster spots. So we save the commissioner a step or two during the configuration so that they don't have to do any extra legwork, and we let people join the draft with that URL. For the advanced and custom drafts, the way it works today is that the league mates, we're going to call them league mates, that when they try to load the draft room, they are prompted to log in. That's true for all draft types. And the commissioner during the draft setup has to define the parameters for each team, the roster spots available, the budget that's available, the turn sequence that they want to follow, and any keepers that you don't assign the keepers during the setup. You assign the keepers in your clubhouse, but then the keepers show up during the draft room setup. If you use a clubhouse, you'll understand what I mean. And then when a person tries to join the draft room, they create their Drafty account and they try to log in. The commissioner has to assign them to a team by copy and pasting their email address today, but very soon, instead of typing in an email address, they will just drag and drop the user from the spectators list to one of the teams. And that will automatically refresh the draft room for that user, for that league mate, and they'll be off to the races. So it was amazing how many questions I got about this this past draft season, with commissioners getting, they weren't frustrated, but they were just like, hey, my guy can't join the thing. We put it in the FAQs. Not everybody read the FAQs, and so it just became kind of the recurring question, probably at least once a day. This past draft season, I got a support ticket, somebody asking what's wrong with my draft room, and I just directed them to the FAQs. So it's amazing how many nuances it takes to make this work. And because the real challenge here, because I said I'm giving you the background peek, the real challenge has been that we have to go from setting up the draft room to authenticating users. But when the commissioner sets up the draft room, there are no users. Most everyone that comes to Drafty right now is a first-time user, so the commissioner can't just have a friends list and they assign them. They have to assign them kind of on the back end. So yeah, it was a really tricky thing to solve for, but hopefully the drag and drop is going to help people a lot. And again, if you have any questions about Drafty or how things work, if you want to make a suggestion or a request for content for a future episode, I'm happy to discuss anything about operating an auction draft website. Yeah, subscribe to Drafty on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We push out the YouTube content on those channels as well. And yeah, good luck with your fantasy season this year.